Thank you all so much for coming to celebrate Dorothy's life. And I think we're going to have, people are going to tell a little bit about Dorothy, something personal that, you know, would appear on a gossip column, but something is personal. So I will start by saying I met Dorothy in probably 1980. Conditions magazine, which was sort of the premier lesbian literary journal, housed in Brooklyn, decided to expand their four-person collective. And so they invited several different writers to join, one of whom was me, and one was Dorothy, and about 3 other people. So, and it was being held in Dorothy's house in Brooklyn, her apartment in Brooklyn. You know, collectives, lesbian collectives, it always involves a lot of food as well as literature. So I arrived with my, I don't know, bagels or something. And I got to Dorothy, and she greeted me at the front door. I'm from Boston. I'm so dyed-in-the-wool a Yankee. I had never been in the home of a white Southerner. And you know, like I left a note for my roommate saying, if I'm not back, this is where you can find my body. And Dorothy was very welcoming, and she came into her apartment, and to come through the living room, we had to part the, like, you know, those, like used bamboo drapes, but these were made from chain links. And I thought, this is going to be an interesting meeting. And Dorothy and I talked about this later, how wary we were of each other because of not knowing the other, as in the other. She felt the same about me, and how if it hadn't been for us being lesbian writers, we probably never would have met, and how much that had changed our lives. And how, as writers committed to liberation and lesbian culture and working class culture, she and I then proceeded to become friends for the next 40-something years until her passage this past November. And when I last saw her, my spouse Diane, Diane took a great deal of care of Dorothy while she was ill and was her executor, and we spent a lot of time with Dorothy at the end. And we said, you know, we had to go on this trip. We were forced to go on this trip to Paris, and we hate to leave you, you know, when you're feeling so ill. And she said, child, just go on and come back and show me pictures. And, but then she died while we were there. So this is a moment of sadness for me, but also celebration, because all the things that she gave me, and certainly I'm sure each of you in different ways, either through her writing or through her friendship, through her mentorship around my writing, has been invaluable. So that's my introduction to my relationship with Dorothy. I want to tell you who's going to be reading, and then they will come up and read. One of our readers isn't here yet, so if you see someone scurrying in,
It'll be a dramatic walk.
It'll be a dramatic wafting across the room. So I think at this point, the first reader is going to be Greg Herren. I'll read everybody's bio, and then people can come up. Greg Herren is the author of over 40 novels, 50 short stories, and has edited more than 20 anthologies. His work has been nominated for prizes such as the Shirley Jackson Award and the Agatha Award. His next novel, Hurricane Season Hustle, will be released in the fall of this year. Thomas Keith has edited more than 20 Tennessee Williams titles for New Direction since 2002. He is co-editor of Letters of Tennessee Williams and James Laughlin, and he edited Love Christopher Street. His own writing has appeared in American Theater, Gay and Lesbian Review, and the Oxford Handbook of Robert Burns. He teaches theater at Pace University in New York. Susan Larson was the book editor for the New Orleans Times-Picayune and has served on the boards of the Tennessee Williams Literary Festival and the New Orleans Public Library. She's a founder of the New Orleans chapter of the Women's National Book Association and the author of The Book Lover's Guide to New Orleans. She's the host of The Reading Life on WWNO in New Orleans. Elisabeth Nonas is the author of 4 published novels and has written several screenplays as well as short stories, magazine articles, and essays. She co-authored with Simon LeVay City of Friends, a portrait of the gay and lesbian community in America. She's taught screenwriting and writing for emerging media at Ithaca College. Her most recent novel is Grace Period, and she is currently working on the sequel. And our final reader will be Patricia Brady, who's an editor, author, and historian. Her insightful biography, Martha Washington, An American Life, helped redefine how we look at the skills and personalities of our country's First Lady. And we really need that help right now with the First Lady we have. She's contributed articles and reviews to history journals and newspapers for many of the past decades. She is especially interested in the history of New Orleans and is a Jean du Couleur. That would be us. So thank you. Great.
I first met Dorothy here at the Tennessee Williams Festival in 1997. Long time ago, I was a lot younger then. I had never, it was also my first experience going to anything like a writer's festival. I'd only been to one book signing ever in my life, and I wanted to be a writer. And we were, Paul, my partner, who runs everything now, we were volunteers. We were volunteers, and I got to pick Dorothy up at the airport. That was my job. I got to pick Dorothy up at the airport, and I vaguely knew who she was. I hadn't read her yet, but I knew she was I was just told she was a National Book Award finalist, and she'd written Bastard out of Carolina. I had no idea what I was meeting at the airport. No idea. And being Southern, I would always pick people up at the airport. I would park in short-term parking and go meet them at baggage claim and carry their bags for them because I was also a personal trainer. But I kind of had an idea of what she looked like, but I wasn't completely sure. And I had told her I was going to be wearing a black tank top. And I was in the baggage claim area waiting and looking around. I knew the flight was here. And all of a sudden I just heard this loud Southern voice yell, "Are you the big handsome gay man picking me up?" And I fell in love. Dorothy was also the first person who ever treated me like a colleague. At that time, I wanted to be a writer. I wasn't a writer yet. I'd written a sports column for a gay rag in Minneapolis, and that was all my publications at that point. And when we got in the car, she said to me, "You just want to be a trainer?" And I said, "No, I want to be a writer." And she put her hand on mine and she said, "You need to start to think you are a writer, because you won't be one until you believe you're one." And Dorothy always treated me like a colleague, and I always really greatly appreciated that. Because I didn't get that from a lot of people. So, reading Dorothy's work, because I read everything after I met her, because how could you not? And I hear it in her voice. I miss that chuckle, that evil little chuckle she would get when she said something. And I learned so much. It changed. Reading Dorothy's essays, reading Dorothy's fiction changed how I saw the world, how I saw myself, how I saw my family, how I saw where we were from, in the back hollers of the mountains in Alabama. But we got out. And so one of the things that was really interesting for me was reading her write about class and how important class is and class distinctions are in this country and how much that plays into marginalization of people who are seen as other. So I wanted to read from her essay, A Question of Class, which was in, I believe, Trash, her collection, Trash. Skin, stuff. Those one-word titles get me all the time. So it's called A Question of Class. The first time I heard, they're different from us, don't value human life the way we do, I was in high school in Central Florida. The man speaking was an Army recruiter talking to a bunch of boys, telling them what the Army was really like, what they could expect overseas. A cold, angry feeling swept over me. I had heard the word they pronounced in that same callous tone before. They, those people over there, those people who are not us, they die so easily, kill each other so casually. They are different. We, I thought, me. When I was 6 or 8 back in Greenville, South Carolina, I had heard that same matter-of-fact tone of dismissal applied to me. Don't you play with her. I don't want you talking to them. Me and my family, we had always been they. Who am I wondered, listening to that recruiter. Who are my people? We die so easily, disappear so completely. We, they, the poor and the queer. I pressed my bony white trash fist to my stubborn lesbian mouth. The rage was a good feeling, stronger and purer than the shame that followed it, the fear and the sudden urge to run and hide, to deny, to pretend I did not know who I was and what the world would do to me. My people were not remarkable. We were ordinary, but even so we were mythical. We were the they everyone talks about, the ungrateful poor. I grew up trying to run away from the fate that destroyed so many of the people I loved, and having learned the habit of hiding, I found I also learned to hide from myself. I did not know who I was, only that I did not want to be they. The ones who are destroyed or dismissed to make the real people, the important people, feel safer. By the time I understood that I was queer, that act of hiding was deeply set in me, so deeply that it was not a choice but an instinct. Hide to survive, I thought, knowing that if I told the truth about my life, my family, my sexual desire, my history, I would move over into that unknown territory, the land of they, would never have the chance to name my own life, to understand it or claim it. Why are you so afraid? My lovers and friends have asked me the many times I have suddenly seemed a stranger. Someone who would not speak to them, would not do the things they believed I should do. Simple things like applying for a job or a grant or some award they thought for sure I would acquire easily. Entitlement, I have told them, is a matter of feeling like we rather than they. You think you have a right to things, a place in the world, and it is so intrinsically a part of you that you cannot imagine people like me, people who seem to live in your world, who don't have it. I have explained what I know over and over in every way I can, but I have never been able to make clear the degree of my fear, the extent to which I feel myself denied, not only that I am queer in a world that hates queers, but that I was born poor into a world that despises the poor. The need to make my world believable to people who have never experienced it is part of why I write fiction. I know that some things must be felt to be understood, that despair, for example, can never be adequately analyzed, it must be lived. But if I can write a story that so draws the reader in that she imagines herself like my characters, feels their sense of fear and uncertainty, their hopes and terrors, then I have come closer to knowing myself as real, important as the very people I have always watched with awe.
Hello. And you can hear me as well?
Yes.
Because I sound to me like I'm slightly underwater. Closer to the mic? Okay, here we go. So, I also met Dorothy either at the Williams Festival or Saints and Sinners, I'm not sure which. I started coming to the Williams Festival in 2002 and Saints and Sinners in 2005. Somewhere in there, while I was working full-time at New Directions, I did a lot of reissues of classic authors, which is natural when a company's been in business that long and they had this long backlist of authors that they hadn't touched for 30, 40, 50 years. And when I was assigned to do a reissue of the play version of Carson McCullers' The Member of the Wedding, I thought of Dorothy. One, because I had read Bastard Out of Carolina, and also because she would come to the festivals and people knew her. And I said to Paul, who might be around here somewhere. No, I think he's out waiting for Pat. I'm sorry, Pat's not here because I was dying to see her face. I said, Paul, I'd like to ask Dorothy Allison to do this. What do you think? And he said, sure. And I said, well, I'd like to, can I be introduced to her? And he said, well, ask Pat Brady. So I asked Pat Brady, and it was at one of those receptions in a historic New Orleans collection space outside with a big, and it could have been Saints and Sinners, or who knows. And in my memory, she took me by the hand. And that's what I was hoping she'd be here for, because then I realized, of course she didn't. She would never do that. She must have said, come with me. But with Pat, I felt that she, guided me physically over. Introduced me to Dorothy, couldn't have been nicer, said, that's a great idea, I'd be happy to do that. And she did. It came out in 2006. And then again, sometime in that area, it could have been that spring, because it came out prior to the festival. And it's a wonderful introduction, of course. She totally related to McCullers. As far as I know, she was the first person to identify Frankie as a baby dyke, which was spot on. And she wrote some other lovely things. But anyway, we were standing around somewhere, and I want to say that it was Saints and Sinners, because I feel like it was when we were at bars and things on Bourbon Street. And there were a bunch of people I didn't know, and I was standing there. And at one point, Dorothy looked up at me, and I looked down at her. And she said to the group in the little circle, do you know this boy? And people were like, no. He is a marvelous editor. And I was slightly embarrassed. Because when you're assigned the editor of record for a reissue, yes, there are editorial decisions. You're essentially rebranding and repackaging whatever it is for a new audience. But I didn't touch her writing. I mean, I might have corrected a little typo or a mistake here and there, but I didn't do anything. And I just kind of thought, oh, so why is she saying that? And fairly quickly, I understood why she said that. And it was from, I did tribute readings with her at the Williams Festival. We did panels at Saints and Sinners. There were social events and things like that. And whenever I could, I would go to one of her master classes or workshops. And what I found out very quickly is that Dorothy's default position in life was to build other people up. And that's what she was doing. And encourage people and inspire people. And perfectly consciously, she wasn't being modest about it. That was what she did. And I don't know where it came from or when she started doing it. But I thought it was beautiful. And so then, over the years, she did it repeatedly. And she would call me Keith, or boy, or child. Child. And my last name is a surname, so that happens. That's sort of common. But in 2019, the last time we were here with Dorothy, or that I was here with Dorothy, and I remember well, it was in the lobby of Monteleone, and I don't know who I didn't know in the group, and she said, do you know this child? He is a marvelous editor. And I said, thank you, Dorothy. Because I knew why she was doing it. Because I thought, how would she know? She wouldn't know. But anyway, she was marvelous. She also, I ended up working with a lot of really interesting, impressive, well-known authors doing those reissues over the years. And I never would impose myself on them. I didn't pretend like I knew them or we were friends or anything. And Dorothy was one of those people that made you feel you were a colleague, as Greg said. And I used to get random texts from her. Child, I was thinking of you, wondering what you're doing. It'd be like 2 years since I saw her. I thought, what's going on there? And then another thing, which I asked Jewelle about this the other night, but starting a dozen years ago, she'd say, Keith, I want to talk to you. I'm writing a novel, and the novel had this wonderful Beckettian title, as in Samuel Beckett, She Who. Don't you want to read that? And she'd say, well, I need to tell you, I based a character on you. I said, oh, wow, that's great. And she said, well, he's a bad character. he's a villain. He does some really, really bad things. And it's based on you. And she'd say, are you okay with that? And I said, Dorothy, if you want to put me in your novel, I'll be a park bench. I'll be a doorknob. I don't care. And then I said, do you use my name? And she goes, oh, no. She said, but you're going to know it. And I said, well, that's okay. So if they ever find that manuscript, Diane, where's it?
We're looking.
Okay.
It wasn't published.
No, I don't know if she finished it. But then the last quick one is that in one of the writing works, you know how people just say amazing things, particularly at these festivals. You meet all kinds of interesting people, and I never write them down. And I always think, God, I wish I'd written that down. What did they say? And finally, I wrote one down. And it was at her master class in one of those little skinny rooms. You were probably there, Greg. I know I was sitting with Carol Rosenfeld. Is Carol here? I was hoping, because she would, I don't remember the question, but I remember Dorothy's answer. And the question was something to the effect of, what do you want your legacy to be? And she thought about it. And she said, I want to be making people uncomfortable 300 years from now. So, this is a short excerpt from this memoir, 2 or 3 Things I Know for Sure. 2 or 3 things I know for sure. And one of them is what it means to have no loved version of your life, but the one you make. Aunt Dot was the first one who said it. She said, Lord, girl, there's only 2 or 3 things I know for sure. She put her head back, grinned, and made a small, impatient noise. Her eyes glittered as bright as sun reflecting off the scales of a cottonmouth's back. She spat once and shrugged. Only 2 or 3 things, that's right, she said. Of course, it's never the same things, and I'm never as sure as I'd like to be. In Greenville, halfway through the 4th grade, we got a substitute teacher right out of college and full of ideas. First, she brought in a record player and got us to sing along to folk songs. Kumbaya, my Lord, kumbaya. Until another teacher complained of the noise. Next, she tried to get us to do news reports, each of us presenting something we had learned from the news the night before. Another time, it might have worked, but the nightly news, this is in South Carolina, for those of you who don't know, Greenville, South Carolina. But the nightly news was full of Birmingham and Little Rock burning buses and freedom marchers. Our reports degenerated into shouting matches and mortal insults, voices raised in more than song. More complaints, and this time the principal came around. Our teacher fell back on what seemed an utterly safe choice. We were to make our family trees, interviewing relatives and doing posters to show the class. You can check family Bibles for the names of previous generations, and if you've got pictures, you could glue them on the posters. She blew hard on a strand of hair that had fallen over her right eye. Teaching was clearly not what she had expected. Or you can make drawings or even cut pictures out of magazines to represent people, anything you like. This is where you get to be creative, make something your families are going to want to keep. We watched as she rummaged through her skirt pockets until she found a hairpin. She spoke while using both hands to tuck her hair into a rough bun. Any questions? She wants you to what? Mama's tone was pure exasperation when I came home that afternoon. She'd been talking with Aunt Dot, spreading clothes on the dining room table, getting them all sprinkled and rolled up before settling down to ironing. Now she looked like she was ready to throw something. This girl ain't from around here, is she? From the other side of the table, Aunt Dot gave Mama a quick grin over the rim of her coffee cup. I can just see all those children putting down Mama's name and first Daddy's name and second Daddy's name. Could get complicated. Dot. Well, you know I'm right. That brand new teacher ain't gonna last out the month. Around here, parentage is even more dangerous than politics. Why is it so dangerous? Girl, you're getting too big to ask silly questions. Well, I need to make lists. I need people's names. Where is our family Bible? Our what? Lord, Lord, Aunt Doc waved one hand in the air. Girl is definitely not from around here. We don't have a family Bible. Child, some days we don't even have a family. Dot, don't get started. Mama folded the sleeves of a damp shirt in over the button front and then, gathering from the collar, rolled the whole into a closed tube. And you just put down what you know. What do I know? Aunt Grace said once that Granny had 11 children. I know 6. 11? Aunt Dot took a sip from her cup and propped her chin on her palm. Was it 11? I thought it was 9. Well, 9, I still only know 6. There's no need to count the dead. Mama snapped a work shirt open and sprinkled furiously. Put down who you know. You don't have to put down everybody, but you're supposed to. Dorothy, her expression stopped me. I knew that look. One more word and I would be in trouble. Well, I don't have Grandpa Gibson's name. Dot put down her cup noisily. Andrew, right? Andrew James. So, Andrew James Gibson and Maddie Lee. Andrew James Gibson and Maddie Lee Garner. Now that's enough. I gathered up my papers and headed out the door. From the carport, I heard Aunt Dot's booming laugh. What do you think? Should we get a family Bible? 2 or 3 things I know for sure. And one of them is just this. If we cannot name our own, we are cut off at the root. Our hold on our lives as fragile as seed in a wind.
I think Dorothy was saying 2 or 3 things I know for sure long before Oprah was. Yeah, I'm just saying. Sure. I first met Dorothy at the Tennessee Williams Festival Annex at Frankie and Johnny's Po' Shop when Pat brought her in, and we began a conversation that has lasted for more than 30 years. We talked mostly about 3 things. We talked about what we were reading and writing, what we really cared about. We talked about our lives in the feminist movement. We remembered bygone newsletters and bookstores and things like that, and movement heavies, as we refer to them. And we talked about our sons. We talked about Wolf, and we talked about Dash. And we talked about our anxieties and our fears that we were screwing them up in the way that only really interesting mothers can do. And over the years, we had lots of texts, and so it occurred to me that that's in many ways how we remember people. And so I thought I would share some of my texts from Dorothy about Wolf particularly. The first text is the saddest one from October 19, 2022. My Alex passed at 12:30 today. We are barely managing. People are here helping. It's just hard. I dreamed I was standing on the levee in New Orleans with you, pointing out landmarks, swaying back and forth. I've lost about 20 pounds recovering from the flu, not COVID. Boiling potatoes with bacon chunks while you tell me recipe secrets. Black peppercorns and sour pickles. Wolf does laundry and I answer the phone. Take care of yourself, my friend. Wolf is being the Mitch. I seem to have lost 20 pounds and don't sleep much, but managing. We are isolated on our hill above the floodwaters. This is much later in the great floods. But today we have power, so we're recharging everything. Wolf and I are keeping the wood stove going for warmth, dragging redwood branches out of the driveway. All our neighbors are widows, so we work together. My tall, strong son is very popular. He is adjusting. Had to hire an arborist to take down redwood branches after a few smashed down and barely missed wrecking the car. Old friend who hung upside down with a chainsaw. Nothing like being a homeowner with a checkbook. And then I dream I'm in your living room looking at your Elvis portrait. Anybody who's ever been to my house knows it's decorated in early Elvis. Have COVID and Wolf playing nurse. Tylenol and determination. Dreamed about you and Pat Brady and I in a diner in New Orleans. A reprise of a moment 30 years ago. Wish I could hug your neck. And then there are cat pictures and dog pictures. Coda has a seizure. Dreamed about you last night, remembering all those years ago when I first met you. You were yourself, laughing and talking and telling me you were cleaning the house. Something I have been doing. I've been packing up a decade of my journals to ship off to do. It is a peculiar comfort to have somewhere to put all that. Otherwise, I'd build a bonfire out back. And I thought that was really a narrow escape for all of us. I am too old to think about all this stuff, ready to let the baby writers run the show. But I do like to think of you and your kids, all of us book people in a world of people who just watch TV. Wolf has moved down to Oakland and is getting his new apartment and job together with help. I'm pleased for him, but missing him painfully. Trouble is, he needs to declare his independence by being emotionally distant. I know it's a phase, but it's very difficult. Just being a mom is sometimes very difficult. Oh, what am I saying? It's always difficult. Humans are challenging. But meanwhile, we have no power, and I have had no coffee. I could make a small fortune delivering coffee to neighbors if I could get the camp stove going. And then I wanted to tell the story of how Dorothy met Dash. This happened, it was a surprise to me. Dash was a freshman at Colby College in Maine, and Dorothy went there to give a reading. And all my children in our family tradition work in bookstores. So Dash was selling Dorothy's books at the reading. And afterwards, he went up to her and said, "You know me, but we've never met. My name is Dash." And she looked at him and she went, "Holy shit, you're Dash Wasserman." And she said, "Come with me." And she went over to the book table where his boss from the bookstore was selling books in Dash's absence. And she said, "You can spare him for a minute, can't you? You can handle this, can't you?" And she took him off and they sat there on the sofa and had a wonderful conversation. I said, "Dash, how did that make you feel?" He said, "Well, I was a little embarrassed," he said, "but in the good way, in the best kind of way," which is Dorothy's specialty in many ways. And I love thinking of that steadfast love she felt for Wolf. I love knowing they were together, taking care of the dog, taking care of everything going on. So I love the family of Dorothy.
You can't see it, but well, you can see that I brought a picture. You probably can't see who's in the picture, but it is me, Paul Manette, his partner Winston Wilde, and Dorothy at Paul and Winston's house on March 13th, 1993. And this picture lives next to my writing chair. So, you know, it's one of those things, I see it all the time. Some people almost don't see it, but I see it all the time. And when I knew I was going to be doing this reading, I knew what I wanted to read from, and then we were supposed to say, you know, like, a story about like how you met Dorothy. So Dorothy and I are the same age. Oh, okay. Dorothy and I are the same age, which is 75. So my trying to reconstruct when and how I met Dorothy was a challenge and definitely not linear. So I started from this picture, March 13th, 1993, and we're at Paul and Winston's house, and I am pretty sure that Dorothy and Alex, when was Wolf born?
32 years ago.
So would Alex have been pregnant then? Okay, so Alex and Dorothy are staying at our house, my ex and I, in Woodland Hills, California, and Alex is pregnant in her denim overalls, and I am driving. Dorothy did not drive, so I am driving Dorothy around to book readings, and obviously to Paul and Winston's house. And I remember at one of the readings, I think it's Sisterhood Bookstore in Westwood, she was probably reading from Bastard. And she had a lot of fans, and people would bring things to her. And one woman brought a small wicker basket with a red and white check napkin to keep the biscuits warm that she had made for Dorothy. So I remember that, and then I'm thinking, well, why is Dorothy staying at my house? Like, when did I meet her? And how did this happen? And so then I realized she and I were on a panel at the first Outright Festival in 1990 in San Francisco. So that must be where I met her. And so clearly we exchanged phone numbers, and that is how I knew she was coming to LA, and why don't you stay with us, and I'll drive you to all your bookstore events. And I remember her saying at one of these events, talking about her writing, if her palms weren't sweating, if you're a writer, your palms aren't sweating when you're writing, that's how she knew she wasn't writing the right stuff. And well, Dorothy Allison is actually very central to my being here today, because sometime after that trip, she moved. She was living in San Francisco. She moved out of San Francisco, and I was working on the book with Simon LeVay, and I needed Dorothy's phone number, so I thought I should call her publisher, Nancy K. Mariano, to get Dorothy's phone number. And by that time, my relationship had ended, so I called the firebrand, and Nancy's assistant put me through to her, and I said, how are you? She said, I'm fine, and I hear you're going through a difficult time, which was really strange because I didn't know Nancy at all. So that's the lesbian network. So, and here we are today, because I now live in Ithaca, New York, and I am married to Nancy Brady. So, thank you, Dorothy, for your work. So I am going to read something from Skin, published by Firebrand, and Trash. This is just cool. Trash was also published by Firebrand, and then a lot of what is in Trash became Bastard Out of Carolina, which got maybe a front page New York Times review, and you would have thought that that reviewer had discovered Dorothy Allison, because there was no mention of, I know that's so surprising. But anyway, okay, so this is from Skin, talking about sex, class, and literature, and I chose literature. Dorothy and I may have been born the same year, but I am Jewish from Manhattan, which is different. Dorothy. So, this is the universality of Dorothy's work. A few years ago, I gave a copy of a piece of fiction I had written about incest and adult sexual desire to a friend of mine, a respected feminist, editor, and activist. What, she asked me, do you want from me about this? An editorial response, a personal one, literary, or political? I did not know what to say to her, never having thought about sorting out reading in that way. Certainly, I wanted my story to move her, to show her something about incest survivors, something previously unimaginable and astounding, and not actually just one thing either, as I did not want one thing from her. The piece had not been easy for me, not simple to write or think about afterward. It had walked so close to my own personal history, my night sweats, shame, and stubborn endurance. What did I want? I wanted the thing all writers want, for the world to break open in response to my story. I wanted to be understood finally for who I believe myself to be, for the difficulty and grief of using my own pain to be justified. I wanted my story to be unique and yet part of something greater than myself. I wanted to be seen for who I am and still appreciated, not denied, not simplified, not lied about or refused or minimized. The same thing I have always wanted. I have wanted everything as a writer and a woman, but most of all, a world changed utterly by my revelations. Absurd, arrogant, and presumptuous to imagine that fiction could manage that, even the fiction I write, which is never wholly fictive. I change things, I lie, I embroider, make over, and reuse the truth of my life, my family, lovers, and friends. Acknowledging this, I make no apologies, knowing that what I create is as crafted and deliberate as the work of any other poet, novelist, or short story writer. I choose what to tell and what to conceal. I design and calculate the impact I want to have. When I sit down to make my stories, I know very well that I want to take the reader by the throat, break her heart, and heal it again. With that intention, I cannot sort out myself, say, this part is for the theorist, this for the poet, this for the editor, and this for the wayward ethnographer who only wants to document my experience. Tell me what you really think, I told my friend. Be personal, be honest. Part of me wanted to whisper, take it seriously, but be kind. I did not say that out loud, however. I could not admit to my friend how truly terrified I was that my story did none of what I had wanted, not and be true to the standard I had set for myself. Writing terrible stories has meaning only if we hold ourselves to the same standard we set for our readers. Every time I sit down to write, I have a great fear that anything I write will reveal me as the monster I was always told I would be. But that fear is personal, something I must face in everything I do, every act I contemplate. It is the whisper of death and denial. Writing is an act that claims courage and meaning and turns back denial, breaks open fear, and heals me as it makes possible some measure of healing for all those like me. Some things never change. There is a place where we are always alone with our own mortality, where we must simply have something greater than ourselves to hold on to. God or history or politics or literature or a belief in the healing power of love or even righteous anger. Sometimes I think they are all the same. A reason to believe, a way to take the world by the throat and insist that there is more to this life than we have ever imagined.
Pat's not hiding back there. Okay. What I would like to do is finish our afternoon, our formal afternoon celebration of Dorothy with a reading of one of her poems. Because Dorothy doesn't get thought of that much as a poet. Bastard Out of Carolina did jumpstart the Me Too movement. Her essays have served as groundwork for a lot of political activism as well as social, literary reconsideration of how we use our work. And I have not written anything in 40 years that has not passed through Dorothy's desk and come back with comments. So I feel like she will be with me until I stop writing. And that means a lot to me. Thomas, I'm going to thank you for inviting me to read Tennessee Williams' wonderful works every year, because it makes me work on my Southern accent, because Bostonian is not that strong. So I want to read as a closing the first poem in The Women Who Hate Me. And this was the beginning of me and Dorothy kind of editing each other. She said, I got this book, The Women Who Hate Me. I said, cut that title, don't start with so negative. And that's how Dorothy and I got along so great. She was like hardcore, and I was like, sweet. So the poem is called Dumpling Child. A southern dumpling child, biscuit eater, tea sipper, okra slicer, gravy dipper. I fry my potatoes with onions, stew my greens with pork, and ride my lover high up on the butterfat shine of her thighs, where her belly arches and sweetly tastes of rock salt on watermelon. Sunshine sharp teeth, bite light and lick slow, like mama's favorite dumpling child. So I think we're come to the end of our program. Hard to believe. If anyone has anything they would like to pop up and say, I would love, we got 5 minutes to hear you. Go ahead. 15? I don't know, what time do we end? Quarter? Oh, speak on!
So, I met Dorothy here, and I don't remember what year, it was a long time ago. And I had read her Bastard Out of Carolina, and I just loved it. And I don't remember, but I was in a line to talk to her. And I knew where she was from in Northern California, because I live in Northern California. But the town she lived in had 2 different pronunciations. and I didn't know which one anybody considered correct. And I don't even remember which one I used, but I'll just say, so I said, Dorothy, I understand you live in Gurneyville. And she turned around to me and said, oh, it's Gurnville, not Gurneyville. And she saw my face fall, and so she said, oh, I'm so sorry, that's just a joke. Everybody who lives there, if you call it Gurneyville, they say it's Gurnville and vice versa. And she just gave me a little chuckle, and I loved it. I mean, it was just, I read everything that she wrote after that, and yeah, that's my encounter with her, and it's so much her personality. Yeah.
Okay.
I want to say something about it. I just bought the painting. I love her. I hope I can put it in a museum or some sort of a show, but it's mine. But I read Baxter out of Carolina in one of my doctoral programs. And the professor was a little lazy. She hadn't read it first. So I sat there and I cried. I sat down. I cried, I sat down, I cried, I sat down. I told the professor, thank you so much. And when I met Dorothy here, she hugged me. She's like, I wrote it for you. We went and had lunch. And the thing that she did that nobody else did was explain, like, I remember a part of the book where she was thinking about like how to deal with the trauma quietly. And when I was a kid, I had written once, if I had any wish, I wish I could hurt and not cry. I used to hurt my arms. I'd say nobody could hurt me as much as I hurt me because I like it. And all those the way she dealt with that abuse, it just rang so true to me. Yeah. Like nobody, because it's sort of embarrassing. Nobody's gonna be embarrassed, but yeah, we are. And she did that, and for the first time, like at 27, I read that. I didn't feel like a freak or someone weird. I felt like a young woman who dealt with that the best she could. So that made a real difference for me, and that's why I'm honored to oversee.
I've always found at a reading with Dorothy, I felt like if we read together, I had to carry the Kleenex because people would throw themselves into her arms, sobbing because she touched their lives and helped show them how to recover from abuse. And they would be sobbing, and she would just be mama-ing them all along.
I was going to say, a few years ago, I had the pleasure to interview Dorothy Allison here at Saints and Sinners, and there are many stories that she told during that session, and two of them that stand out to me is when I asked her, how did you feel about meeting Angelica Houston, who did the film Bastard Out of Carolina? And she goes, she walked over to me and started crying on my shoulder, and I just thought, this bitch smells good. Later on during the interview, somebody asked, what would you like to leave as a legacy? And she said, a legacy? In my family, you can be considered rich if you got the dog or the pickup truck.
Yeah. Somebody else want to tell us a secret story? Yeah.
I love Dorothy's writing. I'm sad that I only got to meet her once at a party to the Village Voice Literary Supplement. But I want to add to the ways we're honoring her. I want to honor her for co-creating the first organization for lesbian and sadomaso activists. San Juan in New York in the late 80s, and for advancing sexual freedom boldly always.
Yes.
Well, just to say that unfortunately, I've been involved with the festival a long time, my husband and I, and in those very early days, it meant so much to have someone like Dorothy embrace the festival.
Yes.
And say, you know, you all matter, and I know Susan certainly can speak to this too. You know, we had some very special friends out there that initially we didn't realize we had. And the whole idea that they would come here, I mean, she's a big deal, okay, and you know, and then and now, of course. But for her to come to the city and spend time, and then become friends with Pat and with Susan and many others. From the early days here, we're trying to do something, you know, unlimited beings. And she was with us all the while. And I just gotta say, that meant a lot, that's all. Thank you.
Anyone else? Come on. I know you got secrets you want to spill. We could just make things up about her. Just love that.
They'd probably be true.
And they probably be true. I'll read one more of her poems. This is To the Bone. That summer I did not go crazy, spoke instead to my mama who insisted our people do not go crazy. We make instead that sudden evening silence that follows the shotgun blast. We stand up alone 20 years after like a scarecrow in a field. Pie-eyed, toothless, naming our enemies and outliving them. That summer, I talked to death like an old friend and a husky voice whispering up from my cunt, echoing around my knees, laughing. That summer, I did not go crazy, but I wore very close to the bone. Y'all don't start talking, we're gonna be walking. We could all go down to the bar and have a drink on Dorothy. Thank you all very much.